Hi everyone, it's John Mitchell and welcome to video 3 of our exam preparation series. I hope everyone's revision and study is going well. So today, the question we're going to venture back to is in 2010. So this question averaged 1.8 marks out of 6 and was obviously answered really poorly. It was one of the worst ones in the exam that year. So we'll just have a look at it. And remember, don't try and memorize the answers. Look at how they've answered the question and where others have gone wrong, because as we've said before in the other videos, the stimulus will change, and this question actually is a really good example of where the stimulus material will most likely be different. So here's today's question. Ms. West has just purchased a designer clothing and manufacturing company. She would like to expand the company and start exporting. So that's the stimulus material they're giving you. Now here's the question. Compare and contrast two potential management structures that would assist Ms. West to achieve these aims. Which management structure would you recommend to Ms. West and justify your choice? 6 marks. So you can see here there's quite a lot in there. Now just before we move on, these days they don't normally, as of last year, they don't normally use compare and contrast. They use the word compare on its own, and essentially that means the same thing. So compare and contrast now is simply done as compare. Well, as of last year it was anyway. Whether that changes again in the future, I have no idea. So going on with what the technique of circling the descriptive terms, so the things that you have to do. So you obviously have to compare and contrast to, and you have to then recommend, and you have to justify. So essentially in this question there are 4 things you need to do. So if you look at the marks, you can probably say, well, I'm going to get 2 for comparing, 2 for contrasting, 1 for recommending, and 1 for justifying. That's more than likely how you're going to be. When you break it down like that, it becomes really easy to see where your marks are. Also, we need to underline the content, and this is essentially about management structures. Now here, I would do something else here as well. So because we need to recommend, the key is here we need to actually recommend and justify a choice. We need to recommend the most appropriate. So I would also look at what Ms. West is trying to do. So she's trying to expand and start exporting, and that's what her aims are. When it says these aims, that's what she's trying to do. She's trying to expand and export. So what management structure is going to be the most appropriate? Which one would I recommend in order to help her achieve those aims? And then I need to justify it. So that's important information also. So this is what the Chief Examiner has said in the examination report, and again we thank the VCEE for the information they provide on their website. So generally this question was not answered well. Most students simply described 2 management structures without comparing and contrasting them. That is a really common mistake in exams. They simply describe, they don't, and essentially the main reason is because they don't know what compare and contrast means. If students had a weak recommendation and justification, they scored very low marks. Even if you compared and contrast, which most people didn't do, in all honesty, in this question. There was lots of questions where they just simply described the 2 structures and described them really well, but you don't get any marks for that because you haven't answered the question. But you had to give a really good justification to get good marks for it also. So here's an answer. Now this is quite large obviously, but we've broken it down into different sections. So you can see here they've defined a management structure, right, the way in which managers, employees and functions are arranged. They've then essentially defined 2 different management structures. So one management structure is a functional, they go on and define that, and then a different management structure is a matrix structure, and they go on and define that. Now essentially that's a description, so they haven't got any marks yet, but it sets up the question really well. Because what they do now, this is where they get their marks. The 2 structures are similar. Automatically when I'm reading that as an examiner, I know that you're going through similarity, so you're comparing here. In that they both have functional departments with managers at the top of the structure, so pretty basic stuff. And they're doing a second one. They are also similar as they have functional departments which allow for specialisation. So that's fine. Then part of compare, well now they're contrasting, but just remember the other part of comparing is looking at the differences. The 2 structures are different in that the matrix structure involves teams across functions, whereas a functional structure does not. Matrix structure will also have more managers than a functional structure, as there will be a manager for each team as well as each department, which is all legitimate differences between the two. So there, they've probably got, they've got 4 marks there because they've done 2 similarities and 2 differences. Now, they just structure it the way the question has been asked, and they recommend. I would recommend that Ms. West use a matrix structure at her design clothing company. So bang, there's a mark. She's recommended. Or he's recommended, whoever has written this, I've got no idea. And then justification. So a strong justification. This is because, so that this is how they're justifying. A matrix structure is more flexible, so they're starting to go through the advantages of a matrix structure, and they're going to link it to Ms. West's aims. That focus on a functional, more flexible than a functional structure. It also has greater organisation focus rather than purely a functional focus, which means employees will strive to achieve both functional specific and organisational wide objectives. Additionally, so it continues on and on and on. So that's a really good answer because they have, if we go through it again, they have done the similarities, the differences, recommended, and justified. And they've answered it exactly the way the question was asked. That's what it asked for. Compare, contrast, recommend, justify. And that's how they've structured their answer. So just to recap, compare means similarities and differences. So if you see compare and contrast, it means similarities and differences. If you just see the word compare, as of last year, for some reason they changed that, and it is the similarities and differences for just the word compare. So descriptions are not enough. Make sure that you answer all parts of the question, so you can't just compare and then in that question and then not make a recommendation and justify. Make sure you're picking out all parts of the question, and that's where that circling the descriptive terms will really help you. Answer the question. I always recommend to my students that to answer the question the way it's been asked. So this one looked for similarities, differences, recommendation, and justification. And always think about the relevance to the stimulus material. That's really important because the stimulus material will change, and that's why it's important not to regurgitate answers that you've sort of looked at from past exams. To access more resources to help you with your exam, including our practice exam that we worked really hard on and SACS, then come over to teachingbubble.com.